So if you had told me a year ago I'd go 60 days without eating a single vegetable, I would have laughed. But here I am, 60 days on a strict carnivore diet. And today I want to walk you through why I did it, what happened, and what I've learned. So, welcome back to the Obesity Project. My name is Dr. Mark Schenkman. Today, episode 57, 60 Days on Carnivore, what I learned about meat, metabolism, and medicine. So, before carnivore, I was already doing what most people would consider extremely disciplined: a very low carb diet, intermittent fasting on an 18-6 window, meaning 18 hours of fasting, 6-hour eating window. I wasn't eating junk food. And uh, with my dinner at night, every other night I had a starch. So, despite that, my A1C was climbing. My weight was slowly increasing. And I knew that meant one thing: my insulin resistance was continuing to get worse. So I decided to take a more extreme approach, not for weight loss, not for energy, but to tackle the root issue, which is hyperinsulinemia or elevated insulin levels, head on. So let me break down what I eat, what my typical day looks like on the carnivore diet. So for breakfast, I typically eat some eggs, some cheese, and either bacon or sausage. Usually about 3 to 4 eggs. I don't go crazy. I know some of the carnivores out there are doing 6, 7, 8 eggs. I don't need that. I don't need that much volume. However, then for lunch, lunch is a very different thing for me than maybe many other people. So for lunch, I typically have some bone broth and something quick that I can grab, usually like some shrimp or some deli meat or cheese, or very often it's a couple hard-boiled eggs. So the reason for this is that I work as an oral surgeon, 8 to 4, straight through, no breaks, no stopping for lunch, no breaks throughout the day, pretty much straight through, finish, change, go home. So for lunch, I cannot make something that I need to heat up. That's going to take me some time to sit down and eat. I need to really get something that's sort of more on the go. And before I was doing carnivore, I was doing medically supervised shakes. The bone broth seemed like a natural transition for me, and I actually very much enjoy the bone broth. And then for dinner, it's always centered on some sort of animal protein, ruminant meat like beef or lamb, sometimes pork or chicken or turkey or fish. I love seafood, so throw seafood into the mix. But no snacks, no carbs, no plants. So the no snack, I will, a little caveat to that one. On occasion, especially if I'm eating some lean meats, and my wife very often, when we sit down after dinner and either play a game or watch a show on TV for a little bit, she very often will snack. And occasionally I'll have some pork rinds, which sort of feeds that snacking habit. And it's immediately after dinner, so it's really almost part of my dinner, not 2, 3 hours later. And so my diet is completely 100% animal-based food. That's it. So here's what happened over the last 60 days. And I will talk about labs, but labs will come in the next video when I cross 90 days and redo my laboratory findings. So I did some labs. I did have some labs drawn, particularly with lipid panel and full spectrum of that, which we'll get into much more in the next video. But I did some pre-op or pre-diet labs, and at the end of my 90 days, I'll be doing additional labs. So here we're not going to focus much on labs. We're going to talk on symptoms and what I felt or what I experienced after 60 days. So first, energy. So I've always been a pretty high energy guy. I always had pretty good energy, and my energy pretty much remains the same, but I don't get crashes, especially that, after lunch crash, that late afternoon need a energy drink kind of crash. I never get that anymore because on a carnivore diet, you're satiated, you're utilizing fat as fuel, and you have constant fuel throughout the day. You don't need, and you don't get these up and down crashes of blood sugar. So there's no crashes, no surges, just steady energy level. When it comes to sleep, again, as I mentioned, I didn't really have any sleep issues prior. And really, I can't describe any significant changes. But for me, that's a win. And the only thing that I have noticed on carnivore that is probably the same for eating any kind of diet is the later that I eat, if I eat a little bit later on, or if I had a light dinner and I find at 8 or 9 o'clock I'm getting a little hungry and I need something to tide me over. When I eat later, then I notice I don't sleep as well. So, but that's true, I think, of any diet, not just the carnivore diet. So, essentially, unchanged sleep patterns for me. Mental clarity. Here's one that I actually hear all the time, and I'm a little disappointed I have not seen more of a boost. But mental clarity is pretty much unchanged as well. I did not get that, real profound clarity that people really talk about on carnivore diet pretty often. But I also didn't get any kind of brain fog either. So mental clarity really unchanged. That may have been because I was already doing a low carb diet. I was already uh, in ketosis much of the time on the diet that I was on. And so I probably had the same kind of clarity that I have on this diet. Um, as far as digestion goes, this was really a big game changer. So here's what I noticed, and here's where I noticed a real difference. So certainly less gas because there's no fiber that the microbiome is utilizing to create gas and energy. So much less gas, much fewer bowel movements. I pretty much went from going pretty regularly every single day to twice a week. And without getting into too many gory details on this one, the volume is much smaller, and but it is soft, and there's no, more importantly, there's no constipation. So this isn't a situation where I'm only going twice a week because it's really hard to pass those stools. It's because there just isn't as much volume. When you're eating a carnivore diet, when you're eating an animal-based diet, you're utilizing almost all of the food that you're eating, and what little bowel movements you have are really from the dead bacteria in your microbiome that you're shedding, and maybe a little bit of food product. But honestly, that's probably the biggest thing that I've noticed. And it was like my gut finally got a break. Now, let me preface by saying I really didn't have any gut issues leading up to this. So, I know a lot of times people with like IBS and ulcerative colitis and other gut or intestinal issues really notice a big, big difference on carnivore. However, my gut was actually working pretty good prior. So again, not really any significant changes. So what does the science suggest? So why might carnivore be so powerful for people with metabolic dysfunction? And this is really where my focus was. Well, it's because it removes every major dietary variable that spikes insulin, that inflames the gut, or disrupts hormones. You get no sugar, you get no seed oils, no fiber fermenting in an inflamed colon, no just nutrient dense, bioavailable food. And if insulin resistance is the fire, carnivore removes the fuel. So, what about weight loss? And whereas weight loss wasn't my primary goal, I cannot ignore how effective this way of eating really is. So, why is that? Well, because you're not spiking insulin, your body can actually finally access that stored fat for fuel. And because meat is incredibly satiating, you naturally eat less without trying. Now, I will say for me, and my particular situation, I have a wonderful wife who loves to take care of me. She's a stay-at-home mom, and she enjoys making meals for me. She really does. I'm not making that up. She loves to take care of me in that way. And so I do tend to eat 3 meals a day, but I honestly could very easily skip a meal It probably would be lunch, but that doesn't really help so much. It's actually best to either skip breakfast or, more importantly, skip dinner, because then you're increasing those fasting windows, and you're going to see a much greater response in terms of weight loss. But for me, it wasn't about weight loss. It was about really hormonal recalibration. And so this isn't calorie restriction in any way. If anything, I'm maybe even getting more calories than what, actually, no question, I'm getting more calories than what I got before. The other thing I will say about weight loss is, although on the scale, my weight hasn't fluctuated very much, I've lost a little bit. But in 60 days, I've probably only lost 2 pounds. But again, I was kind of at my ideal weight already. The thing that I can tell you, and I mentioned this in the previous video, is early on, especially, I lost a full waist size. So I went from um, before before my diet, I went from a 36 weight to the point at which I started this diet, I was a 34, and now I'm down to a 32. So even though the weight has not fluctuated, and mind you, I'm also doing resistance training. I'm lifting weights 3 times a week, and I'm stretching and doing core work an additional 3 days a week. So 5 to 6 days a week, I'm doing some form of exercise. But this is really something that has changed my body morphology. It's really changed where the weight is distributed. That's really what I've noticed most for myself. Now, if you are severely overweight, if you are obese, or you are morbidly obese or severely obese, there's no question you're going to drop weight. So don't base what I'm saying on the fact that this diet you don't lose weight. I'm 5'6" and I weigh 160 pounds. At the lowest, I was down to 155 when I was like at my lowest weight after numerous different ways of eating and dieting. So I'm already pretty much at my ideal weight. When I got down to 155, I actually looked somewhat emaciated. At 160, I'm really almost perfect for my body frame. So, like, ideal body measurement, it may say I should be lower than that. But when I talk to people, when I look at myself in the mirror, when I listen to my family members, 155 is actually a little bit gaunt looking. I'm a little bit looking almost undernourished, whereas at 160, I'm kind of at the ideal point. So again, I'm not really trying to lose weight. Not that I would mind if I did, but it's something that's not my goal. So as I mentioned, blood work will come, and we'll be talking about that at the next 90-day video. So I know what you're thinking. You've got to be thinking some of the things that everybody talks about. So, like, one, where is the fiber in your diet? And two, don't you need vitamin C? You're not getting enough vitamin C. And aren't you going to clog your arteries with all of these, saturated fats? Well, here's the thing. Fiber, absolutely not essential, especially when you're not fermenting carbs in the gut, whole food carbs, right? So without eating carbohydrates, fiber is absolutely unnecessary. Now, if you are on a carbohydrate diet, it is something that you should get and will help with, preventing glucose spikes and, passing stools and all of these things that they talk about. But whenever anybody talks about fiber being essential, what they're not saying, what they should be prefacing with is, if you eat carbohydrates. If you do not eat carbohydrates, there is absolutely no scientific proof. And many, many carnivores will tell you there is no downside to not getting the fiber. There's no problem with pooping. There's no problem with, glucose spikes because you're not eating glucose. So fiber is absolutely not an essential thing when on a low carbohydrate or no carbohydrate diet. Also, vitamin C from meat is more bioavailable in the absence of glucose competition. So when people talk about you're not getting enough vitamin C, and they're basing it on the RDA or the RDI, the recommended daily intake, or the really recommended daily amount, they're going based on someone, like those criteria were created for people on a high carbohydrate diet. And the truth of the matter is, when you're on a low carbohydrate or no carbohydrate diet, there's more bioavailability of the vitamin C, and it's not as required. The levels are not as don't need to be as high as when you eat carbohydrates. And then finally, the big one. I know what everybody's thinking is cardiovascular risk. Well, when it comes to cardiovascular risk, it's not just about LDL. It's about inflammation, insulin, and particle size. And that's going to be the big kicker when I do my 90-day lab testing, because I guarantee you what we're going to find. And I had definitely had this tested the first time around, and of course we'll have it the second time around, is I had my particle size, LDL particle size measured, and the particle number. So the thing you have to understand about LDL and its relationship to cardiovascular disease is that uh, the larger the LDL particle, the more buoyant it is, the more it floats, the more it actually does not get involved in atherosclerosis. It does not get involved in creating the plaque in the artery that causes heart attacks. The smaller, more inflammatory LDL particles are much more of a problem. And on carnivore diet, only thing that doctors usually look at is your total cholesterol level and your total LDL level. However, the significance of that is LDL will go up in many cases, but the particle size will go up, which has been proven to be more of a longevity marker than actually a cardiovascular risk assessor. And if you really want to look at cardiovascular risk, a much better indicator than LDL is your HDL, your good cholesterol, your HDL2 triglyceride levels. And here's the crazy thing that most people don't realize is that when you're eating tons of saturated fats, your triglyceride level actually goes down. So the triglycerides are the fat that's floating around in your bloodstream. You would think the more of the fat you eat, the more triglycerides would be floating in your blood. But the truth of the matter is your body is in fat burning mode. You're not burning sugar for energy. You're not storing that fat away. So when you're eating, you burn up that fat. And when you're not eating, you're tapping into your energy stores, your body fat, to provide energy to your body. So we have to look deeper than surface level fear mongering, because that's what these concepts are all about. So, final thoughts. Is carnivore for everyone? Probably not. Is it sustainable long term? Well, that depends on the person. I will be honest with you that tonight I went out with my wife for her birthday dinner. We went to a steakhouse, of course. Makes sense, right? But I couldn't eat the bread. I couldn't eat an appetizer. Could have gotten some shrimp if I wanted, but didn't really want to. Couldn't eat the bloomin' onion at Outback, and couldn't eat the salad. But um, so there are times where it's definitely more difficult, but it's a personal decision whether or not to go out to eat. And honestly, it does make going out to eat a little bit more difficult, but it is very powerful, especially for those with food addictions, particularly carbohydrate or sugar addiction, autoimmune issues, or severe metabolic disease. So, is it sustainable long term? Absolutely. And for me, it's been a tool. It's been a radical reset of my metabolism. And sometimes to reverse a chronic condition, you need to be radical. So, this has been episode 57 of the Obesity Project, 60 Days on Carnivore, what I learned about meat, metabolism, and medicine. If you're chasing symptom relief without addressing insulin, you are running in circles. And sometimes the answers are simpler than we think and older than we remember. So thanks for watching. Stay curious, stay skeptical, and fix the signal. So in the next episode, we'll explore why muscle is metabolic gold and how building lean mass transforms your health even without weight loss. Until then, I'll see you in the next episode.